Hey guys, welcome to Denny's. Today we're going to be jumping into the absolute best and most fun way to play Esiemo after the recent buffs and reworks to some of his mods and abilities. More specifically, we're going to be looking at two builds I'll be using now and when the new October 10th update comes out as well, so stay tuned. And before we get into the build and guide, remember to like the video if it helped you in any way, comment feedback you have for me down in the comments below, and as far as subscribing, shamelessly plugging the subscriber metrics here. Only subscribe if you feel that I have earned it today and you want to see more videos like this one. If not, I will try my best to earn it next time, so be sure to keep a lookout on the channel. And lastly, guys, I'm live on Twitch 5 days a week, and we are having an absolute blast gaming and chatting over there, and I would love to see each and every one of you guys over there. There is a link to the Discord community, Patreon, and the Twitch down below in the description if you guys are interested. Without further ado, let's hop right in. Okay, so starting out, first things first, we're going to hop into the reactor first. So I'm going to go over the reactor I'm using. It's the Fire Tech mounted with Secret Garden, and this is best in slot. You want a Secret Garden mounted Fire Tech. However, the roles I have are range and Fire Skill Power Boost. This is okay, but this is absolutely not the best. I want to emphasize, if you're going for a reactor, go for the special rounds mounted fire and tech, but you absolutely need Colossus damage and tech damage if you're looking to boss with Esiemo, if you're looking to help with some burst damage. Now, if you would like to go like a more traditional, and what I think I'm going to go as far as Esiemo's main use, it's going to be like infiltration dungeons, the 400% infiltration dungeons when they come out, and just invasions and all that good stuff right now. So I'm probably going to go for cooldown so I can change the build up a little bit. Like I will talk about in the Descendant modules. I'll go for cooldown and range to get my maximum range, or maybe a little bit of duration. It really depends. Obviously, you could go for like cooldown and tech boost, cooldown and fire boost, range and fire boost, range and tech boost. Now for bossing, I want to make sure that everybody understands, do not get crit damage for my build that I'm running because we are not running crit mods. You just want Colossus damage and tech damage. And this is mainly in anticipation of the skill. Again, I will emphasize this a couple times, but the skill power ATK mods that they will be releasing on October 10th to help Descendants that basically don't have a lot of crit rate. So that is it for the reactor. That's my recommendations. Honestly, it's really not worth farming a reactor right now until the October 10th update, in my opinion, but completely up to you. If you guys want to pre-farm the reactors, that way you can pre-implant them, totally up to you. It's just not the best right now, so I'm hoping that the changes will kind of outline what the best way is going to be moving forward. And then we're going to segue over to the components. So starting off with the components for bossing. Now we're going to use this layer set because obviously there's no other set that gives you that 20 as much as a 26.1% skill power buff. So we're using the 4-piece layer set, but there's 3 very important roles that you're going to need to get to make this build work as intended. And I will be going over like the tech skill guide in the video as well. So obviously that'll be a little bit later in the video, but these are absolutely the most important roles you need. So first one's going to be MP recovery out of combat on the Aux power. That is a must have. Second one's going to be the sensor has to have both max MP and MP recovery in combat. Also a absolute necessity. Very, very important. And then lastly, the memory has to have the MP recovery modifier on it. It doesn't matter any other roles you guys want to get. I myself do not have perfect roles. As you can see, I just make sure that I have the MP recovery modifier on the memory, that max MP and MP recovery on the sensor, and at least the MP recovery out of combat on the Aux power. A blue roll is still completely fine. You just need to make sure you have at least a roll of MP recovery out of combat. Literally does not matter if it's gold or blue at all. Like literally does not matter at all because of how OP this is for the tech in Esiemo's build, which again, I will go over. As far as the processor, completely up to you guys. I usually run like equipment drop rate or item acquisition distance. You can get shield on here if you want a little bit more survivability, but the processor is kind of like always the odd one out. It doesn't really have that much of a benefit, the rolls on it, in my opinion. But that is going to be the components for Esiemo's bossing. I do want to cover the mobbing components really quickly. So the mobbing components are going to basically be for the infiltration dungeons and like the 400% dungeons when they come out. This is going to be basically like a Giga Tank Esiemo version, I guess you would say. So the first set you're going to be using is the volcanic auxiliary power. And then you're going to be using the volcanic sensor for 2-piece, and then you're going to be using the annihilation memory and the annihilation processor. This is to get as much max HP as we can because the sensor, the memory, and the processor all have HP, and then the Aux power, the Volcanic Rock's power, gets a defense main role. So this is to get as much tankiness as you can absolutely get from this build. And we'll go into why this synergizes after, obviously, but this is going to be the mobbing build. You don't need as much damage when you're running around in the dungeons, obviously. I guess we'll see once the 400%ers come out, but this is going to be the baseline for what I'm going to use, unless obviously the new components that come out with the new boss are better for Esiemo, which I highly doubt, because they're probably going to be aimed towards Freyna and Toxic Descendants, Freyna being the only Toxic Descendant right now. We're just gonna have to wait and see, but this is what I'm gonna be running as it stands right now for those harder, live longer bits of content. You'll probably see the background footage. This is what I'm using in the infiltration dungeons whenever I'm running those, and the invasion dungeons for that. And I'm still pretty much one-shotting every single boss at the end of the infiltration dungeons. But that is going to be the components for his dungeon infiltration running, whatever you want to say, Tanksimo, Eskimo, Esiemo, however you want to say it. That's the components for the mobbing and the bossing. All right, and then hopping into the weapon of choice. So this is actually a very important part of the build as far as bossing goes. Now, obviously, Esiemo, not the best bosser in the world, but he's still very fun and satisfying if you do get the one-shots on some of the early bosses if you want to farm them. Or if you're in group combat, obviously, when the new mods come out on October 10th, he might be very handy to just do a huge chunk of damage whenever he's got all of his burst up. He is the most burst you can get in the first Descendant right now. Obviously, it takes a lot of setup, but his abilities can do upwards of 20 million damage in a millisecond, basically, once you stack all your mines up. So with the weapon, we're going with the Secret Garden. We want to make sure to pre-stack this as much as we can, and I'm going to go into that in the tech side of this video. But the Secret Garden obviously gives us the ability pest control whenever we are using tech abilities. It's got a 50% chance to give us pest control, lasts for 10 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. It's right around a 40% skill power buff. A lot of people tell me that, the first stack is 5% and then every stack after is 16%. Honestly, I haven't done any testing on this myself. All I know is it's a minimum of like 30% or like 37%, if that's what the math is, and it's a maximum of right around like 48 to 50% if it is. So I think it's around like 53% if you calculate everything, assuming that it starts with a 5% and then the 3 stacks all give you 16%. But the math aside and the testing I don't want to do aside, it's going to give you a big buff. It's going to give you a solid buff of skill power. And I want to clarify that this skill power is snapshotted whenever you place a mine, not whenever you explode the mine. So that's why you want to pre-stack the Secret Garden before you start placing mines, and I'll explain that again in the tech side of the video. But that's why we're using the Secret Garden. You can see the mods I use it on it. It's the same mods I use for Ajax, mainly just the most damage you can get out of it, in my opinion. This is going to be the mod setup for the Secret Garden, and then we will segue over to the Descendant mods next. Okay, so talking about the builds. So we've got 2 builds. We've got our, what I call low CD burst, which is basically like if you're going to boss with this Esiemo, and then you've got the Tanksimo infiltration. So we're going to start off with the Tanksimo infiltration. So with this, we're trying to get as much HP and as much cooldown and as much MP recovery, as much range, quality of life as we can get. So first and foremost, I want to talk about the Transcendent mods before I don't want to spend too long on it, but a lot of people go with Explosive Evade. That is totally fine. Explosive Evade is a really good Transcendent mod. I do not argue against that. However, I no longer think that it is the best Transcendent mod for Esiemo. I believe that the best Transcendent mod is going to be Creative Explosion, and I'm going to explain why. So whenever we equip Creative Explosion, what's happening is basically it's changing our 4th ability, but it's also changing our 2nd ability, and that is the most important bit. So what it's doing to our 2nd ability, normally our 2nd ability has a 35% damage increase per bomb, and you can max that out at 8 bombs placed. So if you take 35, multiply that by 8 real fast, let's see what we get. 35 times 8, we're at 280% damage increase. That's huge. That's not bad. However, when you equip Creative Explosion, it increases the amount of bombs to 10 times. So what that means is instead of 35 times 8, we're doing 35 times 10. So now we're at 350%. That is a 70% gain, obviously. If you do the math on your handy dandy calculator, that is a 70% damage increase overall, as well as the extra 2 bombs that you place down in any 10 bomb rotation. You're just doing more damage. And now you think that you couldn't place 10 bombs down because you only have 8 charges at once. Well, that's not entirely true. Once you wait for the recharge enough, you're going to be able to easily place down 10 bombs. Super easy, but that's not the whole premise of this build. The premise of this build is basically what we're going to be doing is using our Creative Explosion before we do our rotation. So what I mean by that is what we're going to do is use Creative Explosion, and again, I'm going to talk about this in the tech side, but we're pre-placing 3 mines and then using Creative Explosion. It's going to use up all of our bombs, and then we're going to wait for it to stack all the bombs to stack back up again before the boss actually spawns. And then we will be able to just spam our bombs. We can get up to right around like 30 bombs because of the 40% cooldown reduction that you get from Creative Explosion's Narcissism buff. This is why I think this is the best Transcendent mod for Esiemo, because I know this is an infiltration build, but what we're doing in infiltrations is we're literally just running around with this. We're getting a 22-second duration because of the mods we have. So we get Narcissism for 22 seconds, which means we get a cooldown reduction of basically a maximum cooldown reduction for a whole 22 seconds. And we are just absolutely spamming, literally just spamming our bombs. We have our bombs down to like a 1-second cooldown, our time bomb, and then our guided landmine is down to like a 2 to 3, I think it's like 2-second cooldown. It's ridiculous. You are literally just spamming bombs, and you are doing so much damage with the extra 2 stacks that you get of the damage increase per bomb on the blast ability. So that is my explanation as to why we use Creative Explosion. Let's hop into the build and the actual mods and explain what we're doing. So time distribution and nimble fingers mixed with focus on fire, focus on tech. This is very important. I want to emphasize this. This is what reaches 50% cooldown reduction. So we have 14, 25, and 2 6s. That hits us at right around 52% cooldown reduction. Now, our maximum cooldown reduction is 90%. Whenever we're using Creative Explosion, we get a 40% cooldown reduction. So if we take that 50 and add the 40, we're at the maximum cooldown reduction we can be at. So there is no reason to run MP conversion in this build, because if we have the focus on mods, we are at 50%, which means that whenever we have Creative Explosion on, which is literally all the time in this build, by the way, there's literally not a single time you will not have the Narcissism buff from Creative Explosion, you are getting a 90% CDR. So you're not wasting any CDR with this setup. That's the cooldown mods. You obviously get a little bit of max HP, 52% from time distribution. Then you've got MP Accelerant, Skill Extension, Skill Expansion, and Maximize Range. These are all playing into our quality of life. So the bomb explosion range, in my opinion, needs to be nerfed with this Esiemo, but obviously we're getting the most that we can out of this. So 30 meters is the range for the actual guided landmine to go onto somebody, which is huge. And then the actual explosion radius for both the time bomb and the guided landmine is 9 meters. So we're getting the most range we can. And then obviously with the duration, MP Accelerant and Skill Extension, we are getting a 22-second, like I said earlier, 22-second duration on the Narcissism buff from Esiemo's Creative Explosion. So that is why we're running those. That's going to let us spam bombs for 22 seconds. Obviously, it snapshots everything. So like if you use Creative Explosion at the wrong time, you're not going to refresh your cooldown reduction buff. I really think they need to fix this. I think it's very, very, it's a nuisance. It's really annoying. I think that you should be able to just gain your buff back, even if you only have like 1 second of it. It's really, really annoying. But nonetheless, you just make sure that you're out of the Narcissism buff before you press Creative Explosion again, and then you will get it, and you won't have to worry about that annoying little bit. But sometimes it can be annoying when you accidentally press it too early. You might have to wait a little bit longer. But anyway, we'll move on to the last two. So we've got MP Collector and Increased HP. Now for the Infiltration Dungeons, we do need an MP Collector because that's what we're using our bombs to kill mobs. And we want to have max MP for when we actually go and kill the final boss of the Infiltration Dungeons. Because if we don't have max HP or close to max MP, if we don't have close to max MP, we're not going to really be able to one-shot the Infiltration Dungeon bosses. You still can if you get like a lucky crit, but I definitely like MP Collector. It's just quality of life on the Infiltration Dungeons. And then obviously 218% max HP with mixed with the components that I was talking about. You are at a ridiculous, I think you're at like 16,000 HP for as far as the infiltration build. Now, I do want to emphasize that obviously this is not using the Slayer set, and you are at right around 15,000 HP. You are getting a fire skill power bonus from the component set, but that is the infiltration mod setup for Esiemo. And then we're going to hop over to the low CD burst, so let's segue over there now. Okay, so starting off again with Creative Explosion, and then you're going to notice a few differences. So with this build, I have meticulously like scanned through the options that we have for Esiemo, and I'm sure there might be like some kind of hidden, something I'm missing. I tested him for a couple days, and this is what I came to for the max amount of burst you can do. This is going to be Creative Explosion, utilizing cooldown again without the focus on mods, and I'll explain that. So instead of the focus on mods, we're running we're squeezing as much damage as we can. Obviously, you only get like 5% from Fire Specialist, 5% more skill power than the focus on mod, and then Tech Specialist you only get another 5%, but it's power modifier, so you're not getting a giant amount of damage out of this, but you're squeezing as much damage as you can out of it. we're running Spear and Shield, and we're running Fire Sanctum. So I don't know how to pronounce that, by the way. So those two are going to give us our 10% skill power and 8%. So we're getting 18% skill power from that. And obviously that's way more important for Esiemo because of the way that his abilities scale, with his guided landmine doing 1000% skill power and then 439 from the time bomb. Obviously tech spec, or the actual power modifier, is going to help a little bit more for your time bomb than your guided landmine. But we'll move on. So we are using MP conversion, and we are only using a 5 cost, or excuse me, a 10 cost Nimble Fingers reduced by half. Now, this has been basically meticulously thought out by me because you only have 85 capacity, and I wanted to make sure to hit 50% cooldown reduction without using the focus on mods. So this accomplishes that. Basically, you have a 36% plus a 14%, and that gets you the exact amount you need of 50%. Now, you could just socket the Fire Sanctum, and you, however you pronounce that, and you could get obviously that extra cooldown back if you really wanted to. It's not necessary in this build though, because we're basically just spamming bombs and one-shotting once we have 30 bombs placed. So skill extension, skill expansion, both of the blue mods, so we don't have any negative power modification value, and then we have increased HP again. And the really funky one that everybody's going to question is going to be energy collection on the Xantic slot there below the Fire Sanctum. So this is definitely funky. People are probably going to scratch their heads at this, but once you see the actual footage in the background, you can see, if you look at what I'm doing when I first start a boss encounter, you can see you're with Esiemo, you're actually not in combat as long as you're not being hit. So, for example, on Executioner or Devourer or any boss, literally at all, as long as you've got a little bit of range to make sure that your guided landmines go to them automatically, you're not in combat. So what energy collection is doing is it's boosting our MP recovery out of combat an insane amount. So we are able to just spam bombs without any MP cost at all for the first like 15 seconds of encounters. And you lose nothing. This is how we're able to stack 30 bombs onto bosses without losing anything. Now, obviously, this is a little bit harder on the rooms where you have lava on the floor. However, you literally just pre-place a lot of bombs and then you try to stay off of lava for as long as you can, and that's where the extra range from skill expansion comes in, because you can kind of stay on the platforms while the boss is in the lava to make sure that your guided landmines still go and stick to the target. But this is the build for the absolute most damage you can do, in my opinion, with Esiemo. Now, obviously, you could run crit mods. I guess I'll talk about that real quick. So I don't think crit mods is the best idea. Now, obviously, some people are probably going to run crit mods on him because of the amount of damage he's doing. Obviously, you have like 30 instances of damage whenever you get bombs down, but you won't be able to get 30 bombs on the boss whenever you're running 4 crit mods. You're only going to be able to get like 10 or 15, maybe 20 max. And then the crit mods are buffing a 5% crit rate. Like it's I don't want to, call anybody out, because you do you, and you'll probably do some more damage sometimes, but it's so RNG that I am good. I'm just going to pass on the crit, especially with the mods coming out on the 10th that increase skill power for Descendants that have a hard time with crit. I'm going to pass on the crit. I feel like it's a waste. And I think the quality of life from Spear and Shield, skill extension, skill expansion, and all the way that this build works is just much better than running 4 crit mods. It's way more consistent damage. You know what damage you're going to deal, and you're not relying on crits really at all. Obviously, some bosses, to get one shot, you do need to get crits sometimes, but nonetheless, it's just not a good idea in my opinion. And then that is the bossing for Esiemo. Now, I am going to take some time. We're going to hop into the tech side of this real quick. Okay, so I'm going to do a little live recording, live commentary. I am just jumped into a dead bride. I'm going to try to go through my rotation for the start of the tech explanation for killing bosses, and then we'll kind of go into the details that I would like to go in other than that. But to start it off, we're going to pre-place 3 bombs. We're going to immediately press our 4th ability to get the cooldown reduction. By the time she spawns, we should have our 4th bomb up. We place it and then immediately jump into her, and we are literally just spamming bombs as much as we can. And that is the entire premise of the build. You want to make sure you're always holding W, because if you're holding W, you're able to put more bombs out quicker. We have 21 bombs on her, and she's dead. So I promised that was the first take. Nobody's probably going to believe that, but you can consistently kill Dead Bride, a Devourer. Now, Executioner, on the other hand, without Colossus damage to the Reactor, which I don't have, you can't consistently kill without that Colossus damage. However, that is the rotation, and I kind of want to explain some tech real quick. So first and foremost, with the landmines, so it's proc our cooldown reduction, so we get the cooldown reduction on the landmines. You can kind of see here, if we're just pressing it while we're standing still, they are placed extremely slow. So what you actually want to do is run And doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you're pressing W, even if you're pressing a strafe key at the same time, you can place them way quicker, and you can actually place them at the same time as shooting your Q, your first ability. So that is the big tech benefit. Again, I want to show that. So we used our cooldown reduction. We've got to wait like 5 seconds here for them to start. And this is the kind of annoying thing. The cooldown reduction is snapshotted. Okay, so as you can see, we're going to run and press Q at the same time. And you can see Q is going off. Literally, the animation is canceling each time we're placing a bomb as long as we're pressing this. That's how to get bombs off the fastest. That is how we get all of our bombs off. Now, obviously, each bomb lasts for 16 seconds. And now that is not obvious, even though I just said obviously. But they last for 16 seconds. That is up from 8 seconds that they were prior. So that means if you use this strategy where you're just pressing W to get as many as you can off, you're going to be able to get right around like 20 to 30 bombs. Now, I know that's a broad saying, but for me, I'm able to get right around like 30 bombs before they start exploding if I'm not on Dead Bride. If I'm on Dead Bride, because of the lava, I'm only able to get 20 to 25 off. But if I'm in a boss fight where there's not lava, I can get right around 30 off. Using that tech, you basically just want to try to get as many bombs out in under 16 seconds, and you want to make sure to wait about 500 milliseconds, I'd say, before activating your second ability to explode them, mainly because whenever you place a guided landmine down, it doesn't actually jump to the boss immediately. So to get that last little bit of damage, which is, it's right around like 1 to 2 million, depending on the crit, obviously, if you don't have crit mods, so it's base 1 million at least, and then you want to wait like 500 milliseconds, then pop it once it's actually on its way over to the boss, or else you will not get the credit for the bomb on it because it just explodes and doesn't do any damage to the boss. So that's another little bit of tech. And that is the bossing tech, and we will hop into some tech that I found other than that. And the only other tech that I would really have to talk about is just emphasizing making sure that you are getting the 10 bomb bonus from Creative Explosion and keeping Creative Explosion on cooldown. Creative Explosion is a main part. It's the bread and butter of this build. It's going to be what basically runs our entire build, and being able to spam the bombs and get as many bombs as we can off. Just making sure that you've got the uptime on it, making sure that you've got 10 bombs out whenever you want to do burst, and then kind of just going through and just getting used to the playstyle and the rotation. More or less, you're basically just spamming your abilities, right? Whenever you've got it. So for me, I've got my guided landmine on my mouse button, one of my mouse buttons, and then I've got the first ability. I just press Q whenever I'm pressing W and strafing at the same time. I'm just spamming Q and spamming that mouse button both at the same time while I'm pressing W, making sure that I'm moving my mouse to aim wherever I want my guided or my time bombs to go, and that is literally it. It's really fun. Yes, you could use that meme where, you know, the guy is like sweating super hard and like doing like, you know, his hair's like wet and he's like sweating, he's like staring at the screen, he's like moving and he's like breathing really hard for Esiemo. And then you could obviously use the guy who's like singing and dancing and he looks really chill and he's just playing the game, and you could use that for like Bunny or like Lepic or like whoever else. However, there is something to be said about the satisfaction of doing a complex rotation, or a not necessarily a complex rotation, but a little bit more of a complex rotation, and getting some satisfaction out of that for whenever you are absolutely one tapping. And I do think Esiemo has the most, basically the most burst in the game without crit. You can literally do the most amount of damage instantaneously. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do consistent instant damage. You're not going to be able to, you know, do 50 million damage immediately, or like Haley and Lepic, where you can just keep doing that damage over, you know, 15, 20 seconds. You're going to build it all up with 30 bombs. You're going to press one button, and that burst is going to be the most in the game, is what I'm trying to say. So that is the build guide for Esiemo. I really love him. He's probably my second favorite behind Lepic now, after putting some time into him. I hadn't really put time into him till after right before the buff, to be honest. I was prepping for his buff, and he was still quite fun even then. But yeah, this is the build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope to see you guys on the stream. Don't forget to check it out. The link is in the description below. We're live 5 to 6 days a week over there. And yeah, man, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. But I'm out of here. Peace out. Goodbye.